One of the Pharisees invited Jesus to eat with him. After he entered the Pharisee's home, he took his place at the table. Meanwhile, a woman from the city, a sinner, discovered that Jesus was dining in the Pharisee's house. She brought perfumed oil in a vase made of alabaster. Standing behind him at his feet and crying, she began to wet his feet with her tears. She wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured the oil on them. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw what was happening, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. He would know that she is a sinner." Jesus replied, and remember, the man said this to himself. Jesus replied, "Simon, I have something to say to you." "Teacher, speak," he said. A certain lender had 2 debtors. One owed enough money to pay 500 people for a day's work. The other owed enough money for 50. When they couldn't pay, the lender forgave the debts of them both. Which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the largest debt canceled." Jesus said, "You have judged correctly." Jesus turned to the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? When I entered your home, you didn't give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but she hasn't stopped kissing my feet since I came in. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she has poured perfumed oil on my feet. This is why I tell you that her many sins have been forgiven. So she has shown great love. The one who is forgiven little." Let me try that again. "The one who is forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other table guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this person that even forgives sins?" Jesus said again to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Soon afterward, Jesus traveled through the cities and villages, preaching and proclaiming the good news of God's kingdom. The 12 were with him, along with some women who had been healed of evil spirits and sicknesses. Among them were Mary Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had been thrown out, Joanna, the wife of Herod's servant Chuza, Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. May God add a blessing to the hearing and the living of this holy word. Amen.
Yet again, the Gospel of Luke has given us one of those stories that we love as progressive Christians. Don't we love this story? That Luke is full of these stories where we see Jesus actively, aggressively reaching to the margins of society and gathering those that have been cast out to him. We love the stories where Jesus is bringing them close and calling them to be part of his ministry and his work. We see him interacting with the woman in the Pharisee's house, but at the end of the story, we see that he has brought women into the upper echelons of his work. They're named Joanna, Mary, Susanna, and there are other women who are financing his ministry. And so we love these stories because they open up Jesus in a way that makes it seem powerful and true and real for us. These are the stories that we hold in our hearts as progressive Christians. This is our deepest belief that God is a God that reaches out to everyone. Jesus embodied that for us. I have been holding this story in my heart all week. I have been holding it in my heart. I usually do that each week, but for some reason this particular story really spoke to me in this particular time. That woman, the sinful woman in this story, she wormed her way into my brain. She wormed her way into my heart. And I couldn't let go of my thoughts about her and my prayers. She was my companion all week. And I must say it wasn't always pleasant. She was my companion, but she has been for me a prophetess more than anything. This woman, who's not even named in the Gospel of Luke, has been prophesying to me all week. This is a story not just of Jesus reaching beyond the social expectations, the religious expectations of his day and age, and gathering the disenfranchised to him. This is also mine. She spoke to me this week. This woman who is thought to be sinful. She told me, pay close attention to my journey in this narrative. Walk closely with me. So I did. Here is this woman. Society has deemed her unworthy. Society had told her she was sinful, and they all knew it. She had been cast about. We don't know why. We can only assume what her sins may have been. But I think the first thing we need to remember is that the sins that people hold in their mind and project onto other people are not necessarily the sins that God sees in us. She is called sinful in this story by people, not by God. And there she comes. She comes into the Pharisee's house, the sinful woman that has all this judgment heaped on her, and she makes her way into the house. Has anybody ever wondered how she got into the house? How did she get into this house? He's a Pharisee. Simon is a Pharisee. That means he is a well-known, upstanding religious leader in his community, which would also mean that he had plenty of resources, and he didn't have a little one-room shack that had an open door there. He had a homestead, probably. And in a homestead, his household would include servants. I guarantee you, he did not make that meal, Simon the Pharisee. There were women there and servants there that prepared that meal, who served that meal. And this woman, the sinful woman, makes her way into the inner chamber where the men are sitting down and eating with one another. How did she get there? How did people not see her and stop her? Well, she told me this week. She did. She got into that inner chamber because she was invisible. She was deemed so unworthy that she lived her life unseen. She was subhuman in that world's eyes, and she made her way because people didn't even think she existed. She made it into that inner sanctum. She was unseen. And she remained unseen in this story until she came forward. Until she came forward filled with gratitude and with love. She came forward bravely to anoint Jesus with her tears and with her expensive oil. She came forward, and it was only then that she was seen. But then she reminded me to pay careful attention. She became seen by the Pharisee and the others there, but she was seen only through the lens of judgment and contempt. We heard the Pharisee's thoughts. He regarded her with disdain and disgust. He couldn't see her as anything other than her sin. So she became seen, but she was only seen with judgment.